Under the pale morning sunlight, the large glass windows of the very first Sunrise Cafe glimmered faintly, like a keepsake dusted with the passage of time. From across the street, Ethan Carter stood in silence, eyes fixed on the familiar sign, the very place where everything he owned today had begun. 15 years ago, right on this small street corner, a young man with calloused hands and an almost empty wallet started his journey with nothing more than a mobile coffee cart and a few plastic chairs. Now, Sunrise Cafe had grown into an empire with over 200 locations spread across the country. Monthly financial reports still arrived regularly on Ethan's desk. The numbers seemed pleasant enough, profits stable, revenues decent. But there was one thing no growth chart could ever reflect, the very thing that had been keeping him awake at night. The HR reports showed a sudden spike in staff turnover. Customer complaints about the service were becoming more frequent. Worse yet, employee morale had plummeted, and no one in the executive team could offer a clear explanation. Every answer seemed to be wrapped up in lifeless phrases like market fluctuations, labor shortages, or tightening operational budgets. Oh. And in that moment, Ethan realized perhaps he himself had also become a stranger to the very values he once swore to protect. How long had it been since he stepped into one of his stores, not as the boss, but simply as a customer? How long had it been since he looked an employee in the eye and really listened, without filtering their voices through the cold lens of spreadsheets and reports? That decision was made on that very morning. Instead of his luxury sports car, Ethan borrowed his assistant's old sedan. The expensive tailored suit was swapped for a faded canvas jacket and a low-brimmed cap pulled down to hide the face that had too often graced the covers of business magazines. He called himself by a false name, Eli Baker, just a weary stranger looking for a moment of warmth in the relentless grind of life. And his destination wasn't one of the glamorous stores in a bustling shopping mall. It was the very first Sunrise Cafe, one that once smelled of freshly toasted bread and just roasted coffee beans. The place where, every morning, the young 20-something Ethan had stood behind the counter, hands stained with coffee grounds but always wearing a bright, hopeful smile. For the first time in years, Ethan walked through those familiar doors, but this time it wasn't to check profits. It was to find something he feared he had unknowingly lost: the heart of Sunrise. And right there, behind what seemed like the simplest cup of coffee, a shocking truth was waiting for him. Under the soft yellow lights filtering through the fogged-up windows, the Sunrise Cafe that morning felt unusually quiet. The espresso machine hissed faintly, the warm, comforting scent of coffee drifting gently through every corner of the shop. Ethan sat at a small table by the window, his hands clasped tightly, his mind heavy with unspoken thoughts. He wasn't just waiting for a cup of coffee. He was waiting for the truth hidden beneath the glossy facade of the empire he once took such pride in. The waitress approached a young woman with neatly tied brown hair, wearing a carefully fastened but somewhat faded apron. A gentle smile played on her lips, but her eyes, they held deep shadows, the unmistakable signs of sleepless nights and hidden sorrow. On her name tag was a short, elegant name, Lena. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you today?" Her voice was soft, but beneath it was an exhaustion she could no longer hide. "One hot Americano, please, thank you," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice as casual as possible, though a strange heaviness stirred within him. Lena turned away, her small hands swiftly working the old espresso machine. As she bent down to retrieve coffee beans from the cupboard, a faint sigh slipped out, seemingly unintentional. But then, clear as day, Ethan heard her whisper to a colleague nearby, "I wonder if we'll get our full pay this month. The manager said we have to pool our tips again." The words floated as lightly as a breeze, yet to Ethan, they landed like a crushing stone. He sat there, stunned, his heart tightening. Tips withheld? A communal fund? These were terms he'd never encountered, never once mentioned in any report he'd meticulously reviewed. His hand clenched the coffee spoon, the coldness of the metal pressing against his palm, trying to drown out the bitter surge of emotion rising inside. When Lena returned and gently set the coffee cup on the table, Ethan forced a smile and asked carefully, "Looks like work's pretty tough, huh? Is everything all right here?" Lena paused for a moment, her eyes dimming just briefly before she smiled again, the same gentle yet distant smile, as if well practiced in hiding things she could never voice aloud. "Yes, I'm used to it now. As long as I do my job well, that's all that matters." She gave a polite bow and quietly turned away, her small frame slowly disappearing behind the counter. Ethan watched her retreating figure, a painful question echoing through his mind. How long had it been since the smiles at Sunrise Cafe were real, born of joy, not mere habit? The steam curled up from his cup, But the bitterness on his tongue didn't just come from the Americano before him. It came from a harsher truth now, slowly unfolding a truth he, the very owner, had turned a blind eye to for years. Beneath the faded jacket and the low-brim cap, Ethan Carter, the man once hailed as the man who brought dawn to the F.B. industry, kept returning to Sunrise Cafe again and again. Each day, he chose a different time. Early mornings when the shop had just opened, the crowded noon hours bursting with customers, or the quiet late afternoons when only the soft clinking of cups echoed through the empty space. And it was during those very hours that the glossy masks crafted by the company's internal reports began to fall away. At 10 a.m., in the stuffy storage room heavy with the stench of dampness, Ethan stood hidden behind a shelf and witnessed a scene that made his blood run cold. Garethi, branch manager he had once trusted, casually accepted an envelope from a supplier's hand. A smug smile spread across Gary's face as his cold eyes swept over the delivery of low-grade coffee beans being hauled into the warehouse. Old, moldy sacks with not a single certificate of quality, yet they were still accepted without hesitation. At noon, near the cashier counter, Ethan clearly heard Gary's mocking whisper to a staff member who dared to complain about the work schedule. "Don't like night shifts? Then just quit. And if you want the good shifts, you'd better learn to play along." Ethan noticed the shift schedule carelessly tossed on the counter. A few names were crossed out, replaced by those who knew how to behave, and everyone understood what that really meant, accepting fewer hours, surrendering half their tips without a word of complaint. That late afternoon, as the crowd thinned, Ethan stepped into the storeroom seeking a quiet corner to calm his rising anger. And there, his heart clenched painfully. Lanath, petite girl, whose eyes always seemed to carry a quiet resilience, was sitting on an old crate, hastily nibbling on a dry piece of bread with no filling. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone, scrolling through a long list of unpaid hospital bills. But just moments later, when the front doorbell chimed, Lena straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and walked back into the lobby with a radiant smile like no storm had ever passed through her heart. Ethan turned away, his fists clenched tight, his eyes burned hot with unshed tears. The very place that had once been his greatest pride, the birthplace of his dream to bring light and hope to others, had now become a place where genuine smiles were buried beneath exhaustion and silent suffering. In the following days, he witnessed even more bitter truths. Coffee brewed from low-grade beans, yet sold under a luxurious label. The signature flavor of Sunrise, the one that had built its reputation, was now nothing but a faint shadow of its former self. Employees treated like machines, sudden shift cuts, no one daring to complain. Those who resisted simply vanished from the schedule overnight. Gary grew plumper, dressed flashier, his smug smile more disdainful. Each time he strutted past employees, he treated like mere pawns in his game of personal profit. Ethan realized it wasn't the operational system that was failing. It was the heart of Sunrise Cafe that had completely lost its way. He started this business to create value for people, to make each cup of coffee a source of joy and warmth. But now, beneath the glamorous facade were exhausted souls, faded smiles, and eyes too tired to even dream of tomorrow. And in that moment, he knew the Sunrise dream had to be reignited from the very darkest corner it had fallen into. Emotions surged in his chest, but Ethan wouldn't allow himself to act recklessly. He knew that if he truly wanted to reignite the light of Sunrise, everything had to be done methodically and thoroughly, not just removing a few bad apples, but reviving an entire garden that was withering away. The very next day, Ethan returned at dawn when the city was still asleep. The cafe had only a handful of early shift employees preparing to open. From a corner of the store, he clearly heard Gary barking at the service staff, "Don't be lazy. Don't make me start a review list. Remember, one mistake and I'll cut your hours without warning." Lena quietly folded napkins, her thin fingers trembling slightly. A younger male employee, his face still carrying an air of innocence, mustered all his courage and softly asked, "Manager Gary, could I possibly get an advance on my pay? My mom's in the hospital." Gary's harsh, mocking laughter echoed through the space. "An advance? This is a workplace, not a charity. If you're still standing there, you might as well prepare your resignation papers." Ethan clenched his fists. That scornful laughter, the bowed heads, the dreams being crushed right where hope was meant to be ignited, it all made his chest feel unbearably heavy. That afternoon he returned again, this time posing as a customer sitting near the delivery area. When the coffee shipments arrived, Ethan quietly stood up and moved to the back. Just as he suspected, the sacks were old, carelessly packaged, with no quality control seals whatsoever. Gary smiled broadly as he signed for them without even bothering to check. In the shadows, Ethan silently documented everything, capturing every piece of evidence, every sinister smile of the man shamelessly selling off Sunrise's reputation for thick envelopes of bribes. That night, as the employees prepared to close up, Ethan once again entered the storeroom. He found Lena curled up next to a pile of crates, her eyes dark with exhaustion, her hands flipping through a stack of lengthy hospital bills. On her old phone screen, a stark notification flashed. Account balance, $12.75 USD. She gave a faint, bitter smile, quickly wiped away the notification, then stood up, adjusted her apron, and stepped back out onto the floor with the same gentle smile as if nothing was wrong at all. In that moment, Ethan understood clearly. Sunrise needed a storm of powerful 1A to sweep away the dark clouds and return a clear blue sky to people like Lena, those who had quietly endured for too long. He took a deep breath, his eyes turning to the Sunrise Café sign, glowing brightly against the night. Never before had that name filled him with such a sense of remorse. But this time, he was ready. Ready to restore the values he once believed were long forgotten. Tomorrow, the sun would truly rise again for Sunrise, and it would shine brighter than ever before. The next morning, the sunlight seemed clearer, but the atmosphere at the Sunrise branch was thick with tension. Rumors had already swept through every corner. The big boss is coming, and this time, not as a stranger. At exactly 9 a.m., the large glass doors swung open. Ethan Carter stepped in, no longer hidden beneath a low-brimmed cap or a faded old jacket. Instead, he wore a sharp, dark blue suit, and on his chest gleamed a familiar name badge. Ethan Carter, CEO, founder, Sunrise Café. The room fell completely silent. Every eye locked onto the man they had unknowingly served, never realizing who he truly was. Ethan strode directly into the lobby, his cold gaze sweeping across each face. Gary, standing behind the counter, went pale, his lips trembling but unable to form words. And Lena, still standing at the cashier station, looked confused, her small hands clutching the edge of her apron tightly. Ethan's voice broke the silence, deep, calm, but firm. I believe today we need an honest conversation. No reports, no excuses, just the truth. He motioned to the security team. The large screen behind them flickered on. The entire room held its breath as image after image appeared before their eyes. Gary casually accepting a thick envelope from a supplier in the parking lot. Worn out, low-quality sacks of coffee beans being delivered into storage. Gary's harsh voice coercing employees to sign documents, surrendering 50% of their tips. And finally, the heart-wrenching footage of Lena, sitting quietly in the storeroom, her trembling hands scrolling through a long list of hospital bills on her phone, then silently eating a dry piece of bread without a single complaint. Ethan clenched his fist, his eyes locked directly on Gary. Gary, do you have anything you'd like to say? Gary's face turned ghostly white, sweat pouring down his forehead as he stammered. I was just cutting costs as instructed, sir. Ethan's lips curled into a cold, razor-sharp smile. Cost-cutting does not mean selling out your morals. As of this moment, you are terminated. And don't worry, the board of directors and the authorities will be following up with you very soon. Then he turned his gaze to the rest of the staff. If anyone else has been complicit in these actions, step forward now. This is your final chance to choose, honor, or lose it forever. Several mid-level managers lowered their heads and quietly walked out, leaving cold, empty spaces in the hall. Then, Ethan's gaze settled on Lena. He walked slowly toward her and gently asked, "Tell me, after everything you've endured here, why haven't you left?" Lena clutched the hem of her apron, her voice trembling, but her eyes sparkled with unshakable resilience. "Because I believe one day this place will live up to its name, Sunrise. There will be a real dawn, sir." The entire room fell silent. In that moment, Ethan felt a sharp pang in his heart, not from regret, but from a flicker of hope, rekindled in a soul long frozen by the weight of numbers and charts. He took out a bank card and gently placed it in Lena's hand. "There's $50,000 on this card, enough for you to care for your mother and finish the dreams you had to put on hold. This isn't a gift, it's an investment. Do you have the courage to accept it?" Tears streamed down Lena's face. Her hands trembled, but eventually, she gripped the card tightly, as if holding on to her very destiny. Ethan continued, his warm, steady voice echoing through the hall. "And today, I officially announce Lena will become a participant in Sunrise's executive management training program. We don't just serve coffee here, we serve dreams. And starting from this very moment, Sunrise will truly welcome a new dawn. The sound of applause erupted and echoed endlessly throughout the hall. For the first time in years, a genuine smile returned to Ethan's face, the man once known as the man who brought dawn to the F.B. industry. But this time, the applause wasn't cold and perfunctory. It was the heartfelt applause of souls finally set free after long years of silent suffering. Some employees were moved to tears, and without anyone prompting, they all stood, bowing deeply to Ethan, as if they were welcoming the true sunrise they had waited so long to see. Lena stood silently amidst the crowd, her small hands still gripping the bank card, crystal clear tears rolling down her cheeks. She wept not from sorrow, but because, for the first time after all those long, dark days, she felt truly seen. Ethan stepped up onto the stage, slowly loosened his tie, unbuttoned his collar, and came down to stand among his employees. I once believed that standing above was the only way to see the full picture. But the truth is, it's only when I stood right here, where you've been standing all along, that I finally understood just how far Sunrise had strayed. He paused, his eyes sweeping across tear-streaked faces before resting, for a long moment, on Lena. I owe you all an apology, but I also promise you this starting today, Sunrise will no longer be just a brand. It will once again live up to its name, a true beginning of brighter days to come. And the atmosphere in the hall grew heavy with emotion. Everyone seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Ethan turned to the communications team and signaled, "Right now, I am signing the new employee benefits reform. From this moment forward, all tips will belong to those who have rightfully earned them. Healthcare and insurance benefits will be restored and upgraded within this month. Emergency funds will be established at each branch to support those facing special hardships. And most importantly," he paused again, a faint but proud smile lighting his face, "we will officially relaunch the Executive Management Training Program, and the very first person to enter that program will be Lena." The entire hall erupted. Applause and cheers broke out like a dam finally giving way, washing away years of suffering and resentment. Employees surrounded Lena, congratulating her, hugging her as if she had become the living embodiment of hope, a symbol of a true new beginning after a long, dark night. Outside the wide glass windows, the sunlight poured down onto the streets. Ethan stood quietly, watching the bustling crowds pass by, his heart lighter than it had felt in years. Behind him, Sunrise was no longer a cold, hollow name trapped in sterile reports. It was alive again, filled with laughter, with dreams reignited. He let out a long breath, as if releasing all the burdens he'd carried, and softly whispered to himself, "From today on, Sunrise isn't just where the morning begins, it's where people are valued, where every cup of coffee truly carries the flavor of kindness and humanity." The official announcement ceremony for the reform program, aptly named Sunrise Reborn, was held right at the first branch, the very place where Ethan had once started his dream with nothing but a small coffee cart and a few sacks of premium beans. But today, that place looked entirely different, warm, vibrant, and filled with eyes sparkling with hope. On the stage of honor, Lenath, once quiet girl who had wiped away her tears alone in the storeroom, stood tall in a brand new uniform, a shining name badge pinned proudly to her chest. Lena Collins, Assistant Branch Manager, Sunrise Café. Her eyes gleamed brightly, no longer clouded with sadness, but filled instead with pride and a fierce belief in the journey ahead. When Ethan handed her the official certificate from the Executive Management Training Program, the hall once again erupted in endless applause. Everyone understood this was not merely a reward for one individual. It was a powerful affirmation. At Sunrise, anyone could change their destiny through their own resilience and dignity. Ethan stepped onto the stage, his eyes shining with quiet satisfaction. His voice echoed deep, warm, and resolute. "The day I founded Sunrise, I made a promise to myself that this place would never just sell coffee, it would ignite new, hopeful beginnings. But there was a time when I lost my way. We allowed numbers to overshadow the value of people. But today, Sunrise will truly be reborn." He held up an official document, his signature proudly displayed across the bottom. Asterisk, "I hereby announce the Sunrise Reborn Program. Comprehensive improvements to employee benefits, so no one will ever have to go hungry just to keep working. 2. Absolute transparency in tip distribution. Every drop of sweat will be fairly rewarded. 3. And most importantly, we will rebuild Sunrise on the foundation of respect, kindness, and justice. Because success is not measured by profit, but by how many lives have become better because of this place. Asterisk, That promise burned like a warm flame, lighting up the hearts of everyone present. When the ceremony ended, Ethan quietly left the stage and made his way to the rooftop of the building, the place with the largest window overlooking the vibrant, bustling cafe below. He stood there in silence, hands tucked into his pockets, the gentle breeze tousling strands of his now silver-streaked hair. Below, he saw Lena smiling brightly as she guided the new staff, her posture confident and strong like sunlight breaking through after a long storm. At the barista counter, the rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee blended perfectly with the cheerful sound of laughter and atmosphere Sunrise hadn't known for a very long time. Ethan smiled softly. For the first time in years of endless business travels, he no longer felt like he was running a chain of coffee shops. He felt like he was nurturing a family where every person was valued, and every new day began with the light of fresh hope. He murmured quietly to himself, just like its name, Sunrise has finally found its light again. As Ethan stood silently on the rooftop, a sudden gust of wind swept through, carrying with it a familiar, comforting scent. The scent of coffee beans, the very same aroma that once surrounded him as he stood cramped in that tiny coffee cart years ago, hand roasting each small batch under the old creaking rooftop. His vision blurred for a moment. Images of those drizzling days, his frozen hands gripping the cart's handle tightly, his bright smile, despite having only a few crumpled bills left in his pocket, all of it came rushing back like a slow-motion film. And then, down below in that lively scene, Lena suddenly turned her face upward. Their eyes met, no words were needed. Just one smile from the young girl he once knew, now standing strong in her new role, was enough to dissolve every lingering worry in Ethan's heart. He lowered his hand, gently touching the cool glass window, as if caressing the memories he had long tried to bury beneath thick contracts and soulless meetings. By instinct, his gaze settled on the corner of the cafe, where the old cart, the very one he once pushed, had been lovingly restored as a symbol of sunrise. It stood quietly, its lights gently reflecting off the faded scars on its surface. A small plaque was mounted on the side of the cart, with words etched deep, like a timeless reminder. From humble beginnings to vast horizons, never forget why you started. Ethan took a deep, steady breath. In that moment, he knew his dream had never truly died. It had merely been buried under misplaced priorities. The cafe doorbell chimed softly from below, pulling him back to the present. The golden rays of the setting sun broke through the gray clouds, shining directly onto the old cart. That light was dazzling, almost as if the dawn itself had truly returned to sunrise. Asterisk. You can accumulate wealth and build mighty empires, but if one day you forget the value of people, then everything you have is nothing more than a castle built on sand, fragile against the waves of time. A lasting enterprise is not built upon polished reports, but in the proud eyes of those who rise step by step, in the calloused hands forever ready to seize new opportunities. Because in the end, success isn't measured by numbers on a financial statement, but by how many lives became better, how many hearts found happiness, how many souls grew stronger, simply because you existed in their journey. And when the new day's sun rises, the greatest joy isn't watching your business grow, it's witnessing the people you once lifted, now standing tall and walking firmly on their own 2 feet. Asterisk.